Before the great flood ever came, before the ark was even imagined, and long before Noah became one of the most important figures in all of Scripture, something profound happened. A prophecy was spoken over his life, long before he took his first breath. It was not a prophecy about rain, judgment, or destruction. It was something far deeper. A message of comfort and divine purpose that would shape human history. The story begins in a time when humanity was expanding, families were growing, and the ancient world was still learning how to live outside the Garden of Eden. The curse placed upon the ground after Adam's disobedience still weighed heavily upon mankind. People worked hard just to survive. Thorns, thistles, hardship, sweat, and struggle were everyday experiences. Into this weary world, a child was about to be born, and his arrival came with a prophetic declaration that no one fully understood at the time. His father, Lamech, looked upon his newborn son and spoke words that would echo through generations. This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. Those words were not casual or accidental. In the ancient world, names carried meaning, destiny, and prophetic direction. Lamech wasn't simply choosing a nice-sounding name for his son. He was declaring something God allowed him to sense, something spiritual, something weighty. The child was named Noah, meaning rest, comfort, or relief. This name came at a time when people desperately needed relief from the burdens of life. The world was rapidly becoming darker, more corrupt, and more violent with each generation. Yet the prophecy at Noah's birth spoke of hope, a promise that God would use this child to bring a measure of restoration and renewal into a world filled with pain. To understand the full weight of Noah's prophecy, we must picture what the ancient world looked like before the flood. Mankind lived hundreds of years. Generations overlapped. Adam himself lived long enough to see 9 generations after him. Stories of Eden, the serpent, the fallen nature of humanity, and God's judgment were all first-hand family memories. But despite knowing the consequences of sin, humanity continued to drift further away from God. Violence began to fill the earth. Wickedness was celebrated. The thoughts of men were becoming increasingly evil. People were moving farther from the Creator, and with every step away from God came more hardship, more rebellion, and more disorder. When Lamech held his baby boy, he didn't just see a child. He saw a prophetic sign that God was not done with humanity. Though the world was decaying from the inside out, God was preparing a vessel of mercy long before judgment arrived. Noah was chosen not because he was born into the right family or because he possessed special abilities, but because God, in his sovereignty, selected him for a divine assignment that would one day change the world. The prophecy of Noah's birth revealed something else. Even when humanity is spiraling downward, God places a remedy within the midst of the crisis. Long before the flood, long before corruption peaked, long before wickedness reached its full measure, God had already prepared the solution. Noah represented that solution. His birth was a prophetic announcement that judgment would not be the final chapter. God would bring comfort, restoration, and a new beginning. But the prophecy had many layers. At first, people believed Noah would somehow remove or soften the curse placed upon the ground. The world had experienced centuries of backbreaking labor. Agriculture was difficult. Survival was a constant struggle. And humanity lived under the heavy shadow of the fall. When Lamech spoke of comfort, many wondered if Noah would literally change the physical condition of the earth. But God had something far greater in mind. The relief Noah would bring would not merely come through farming or soil. It would come through a divine intervention that would cleanse the world of corruption and give humanity a fresh start. As Noah grew, he lived under the shadow of that prophecy. People watched him. They wondered what kind of comfort he would bring. His name became a reminder of hope in dark times. Noah grew to be a righteous man in a corrupt world, something extremely rare at that time. While others drifted from God, Noah learned to walk with him. While others indulged in violence and sin, Noah cultivated integrity and obedience. This was not by accident. God was shaping him from childhood, preparing him for the calling that had been spoken over him at birth. A prophecy is not merely a prediction. It is an assignment, and Noah was a man living under divine assignment long before he understood what it fully meant. The prophecy concerning Noah's life also reveals something significant about the nature of God. Even in times of increasing wickedness, God never leaves himself without a witness. He always raises someone up to stand for righteousness. In a world that is collapsing, Noah became that witness. His life was a reminder that even in the deepest moral decline, someone can choose to walk with God. His morality was not inherited from his generation. It came from his relationship with the Creator. Noah's righteousness was a stark contrast to the world around him, and that difference is part of why God chose him for something extraordinary. But the roots of that choice go back to the very prophecy spoken at his birth. God often begins his greatest works quietly, through small beginnings, through ordinary moments that carry extraordinary destiny. Even before the flood story begins, the prophecy surrounding Noah helps us understand a consistent pattern in Scripture. Before judgment comes, God always sends a warning. Before destruction arrives, God always provides a way of escape. Before the world descends into chaos, God raises someone up who carries his purpose, his message, and his will. The prophecy of Noah's birth was the first sign that God was preparing to intervene in human history in a dramatic way. It was a reminder that God sees everything: the pain, the corruption, the sin, and the suffering, and he has a plan that unfolds in his perfect timing. Imagine living in a world where violence increases each year, where families break apart, where greed is celebrated, where people mock righteousness, and where the fear of God is nowhere to be found. That was the world Noah inherited. Yet his life didn't blend into the darkness. He became a light even before he knew what his future would hold. A prophecy had been declared, and that prophecy shaped him spiritually, emotionally, and morally. While others became hardened by the curse on the ground, Noah grew into the comfort that God promised. His calling wasn't simply to survive the flood. His calling began the moment his name was spoken. He was destined to bring relief to future generations. As Noah reached adulthood, he lived righteously in an unrighteous world. But righteousness is more than moral behavior. It is the quiet consistency of someone who refuses to bend under the pressure of culture. Noah walked with God in a time when almost no one did. Noah lived with integrity when others lived with corruption. Noah stood firmly when others compromised. This is why the prophecy spoken at his birth carried such meaning. He was born to be different, born to stand out, born to be a vessel of divine purpose. He was not shaped by the culture of his day. He was shaped by the calling of God. This is an important truth for anyone listening. Prophecy does not simply describe your future. It calls you into a different way of living in the present. Noah was set apart before he knew why, but God was preparing him at every stage. The prophecy given by Lamech wasn't about Noah living an easier life. It was about him living a meaningful life. Noah's comfort to humanity would come through obedience, sacrifice, and unwavering faith. Even though Noah had not yet built an ark, preached righteousness, or entered the flood narrative, the prophecy over his life was already being fulfilled in the way he walked with God. The world grew darker as Noah grew older. The spiritual climate worsened. People abandoned moral boundaries. Violence covered the earth. Idolatry, immorality, and wickedness corrupted every corner of society. But Noah remained different. The prophecy over his life began to make sense. God always prepares his servants in the place where their calling will be needed. Noah's righteousness was not an accident. It was a divine preparation for a divine task. People likely wondered why Noah didn't join in the behaviors of the world around him. They might have mocked him for being old-fashioned or overly spiritual. But Noah understood something deep within. He was not called to blend in. He was called to stand out. And because he stood out, he was ready when God later spoke to him about the coming flood. Long before God warned Noah of the flood, long before the first raindrop fell, long before the ark took shape, the prophecy declared at his birth was already unfolding. Noah's life was becoming the answer to the suffering of mankind. His obedience would save humanity's future. His faithfulness would carry the human story past the floodwaters. His relationship with God would become the bridge between the old world and the new one. The comfort Lamech spoke of would not be through Noah's farming or through earthly convenience, but through something far greater, the preservation of humanity itself. The prophecy over Noah's life shows how deeply God cares about the world. Even when the world does not care about him, He does not abandon humanity even when humanity abandons him instead. He plants seeds of hope long before the crisis arrives. Noah was that seed of hope. His life was a living prophecy. His birth was a message wrapped in a baby. His destiny was sealed long before he understood it. God chose him, shaped him, refined him, and prepared him to be the instrument through which the world would be renewed. As we reflect upon this first part of Noah's story, we see more than a man. We see the faithfulness of God. We see a God who gives purpose before he gives instruction. We see a God who prepares the answer before the problem reaches its peak. We see a God who is patient with humanity, waiting for someone who will walk with him even when the world walks away. Noah becomes a symbol of hope, of divine timing, of prophetic destiny. And the first prophecy about Noah reminds us that God always begins his work quietly, through chosen individuals who seem ordinary but carry extraordinary purpose. This first prophecy is not simply about Noah. It is about God's character. It is about the way he intervenes in human history. It is about his ability to raise up a deliverer, a comforter, a righteous witness in the midst of moral collapse. Even though Noah did not yet know the details of his future, God had already written the story. And just as Noah was born with purpose, every person who listens to this message is also born with purpose. God sees the challenges of the world and places his chosen people strategically in time. Noah's prophecy reveals that no one arrives on earth by accident. Every life has a calling, and every calling unfolds step by step, just as Noah's did. As this first chapter of Noah's prophetic journey comes to a close, we see a man prepared long before he was needed, a prophecy spoken long before it was fulfilled, a destiny unfolding long before the world understood what God was about to do. Noah's life teaches us that God's plan begins quietly, grows slowly, and emerges powerfully in the perfect moment. And before judgment comes, before change sweeps across history, God always starts with a prophecy, a promise that he is still in control, still moving, and still writing the story of humanity.